We know that children with learning disabilities like dyslexia have incredible strengths. But when it comes to learning to read, write, and spell, they need additional tools and support. That's why I'm excited to share a new virtual tutoring app designed to make effective literacy education engaging and accessible for kids in 1st through 4th grades. Mighty Doodle, built around the Orton-Gillingham tutoring method, uses handwriting, recognition, voice feedback, and gamified lessons to keep kids motivated to practice reading and spelling every day. What I appreciate most about Mighty Doodle is its multi-sensory approach. The app incorporates sight, touch, sound, and even movement to help children build literacy skills in a way that just really resonates with them. If you've been searching for tools that support kids with dyslexia or other learning challenges, Mighty Doodle could be the answer. Research shows it's not only improving literacy skills, but it's also boosting kids' confidence, resilience, and even standardized test scores. Download Mighty Doodle on the App Store today and start your free 7-day trial. Subscriptions are available for $14.95 a month or $149 per year, and every annual subscription purchase helps support their mission of literacy equity. This program is designed exclusively for iPads. Don't wait. Give your child the tools they need to succeed by subscribing to Mighty Doodle today. Visit MIGHTYDOODLE.com for more information or download the app directly from the Apple App Store.
Autonomy support doesn't always mean that you have to agree with the decision your child or teen or young adult has made. It just means that you are there, right? You are there if they fall. You are there if they have made a mistake. You are there to talk things out in a truly non-judgmental way. It just means your presence is there no matter what. And what autonomy support does is it allows individuals to make mistakes. And we all know that we learn by making mistakes, right? We learn how to be. And no one's going to have the truly perfect life, even though that's what we wish for everybody, right? And especially for our children. Mistakes are a part of life.
I'm Debbie Reber, and welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. We have touched on the theory of self-determination on this show before, but today I'm really excited to dedicate an entire episode to this topic. Joining me for this deep dive is Dr. Gina Riley, an expert in self-determination theory and motivation. This conversation will resonate with so many of you because it beautifully ties into themes we often explore here, like low-demand parenting and fostering our kids' natural passions and strengths. Dr. Riley is an educational psychologist, program director, and clinical professor of adolescent special education at CUNY Hunter College. Her extensive research on homeschooling, unschooling, and supported decision-making, which is an alternative to guardianship for students with disabilities, has been instrumental in advancing conversations around personalized and flexible learning models. She's also the author of 3 books, Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom, The Homeschooling Starter Guide, and The Joys of Self-Determined Living, a collection of essays. In this episode you're about to listen to, Gina explains the theory of self-determination and dives into the science behind why it's so impactful, particularly for neurodivergent kids. We explore how it connects with autonomy supportive parenting and get into the 3 tenets of cognitive evaluation theory, which examines what actually fosters intrinsic motivation. We also tackle the hot topic of whether extrinsic motivators like stickers and rewards have a place and how to genuinely connect with our kids' interests even when they differ from our own. This is such a rich and practical conversation full of insights that I really hope you find valuable. I know that I did. And before I get to the interview, I have a quick favor to ask you. There are so many podcasts nowadays, many of which I listen to myself, and I would really like to make sure that parents who are newer to this journey of raising neurodivergent kids are able to easily find and know about Tilt Parenting. So if you're listening to this and this show, Tilt Parenting, has played an important role in supporting your family, it's given you some insights, it's helped you feel less alone, it's introduced you to some experts that have had ideas and strategies that have really changed your family's life. Would you do me a favor and tell somebody about it? Tell other parents in your community who are navigating this journey. Tell other parents at school who have neurodivergent kids. Help me spread the word and make sure that this show is easily found by the parents who need it most, especially those who are newer to the journey and now have so many different shows and resources to choose from. I believe so much in what we're doing here, and I want to make sure that it connects with the listeners who would most benefit from it. So thank you so much for that. Okay, and now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Dr. Gina Riley. Hey, Gina, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for responding to my cold email pitch to you.
My favorite. It's amazing.
I really appreciate it. And I'm really looking forward to exploring self-determination theory and motivation with you today. This is one of your areas of expertise. But would you take a few minutes to introduce yourself and your personal why in doing the work that you do in this space?
Sure. So my name is Dr. Gina Riley. I am Program Director and Clinical Professor of Adolescent Special Education at CUNY Hunter College. I mainly study self-determination and cognitive evaluation theory within the homeschooling and unschooling realms, although my day job is teaching public school teachers in New York City. So I am in schools all the time. I always believe that homeschooling and unschooling is one of the myriad of choices that you can make for your child's education. So I love public schooling and private schooling and charter schooling and everything. I always think it's a parent's choice. I love flexible learning environments, study them often, and I truly, truly dive deep in my work in the theories of self-determination theory and intrinsic motivation. So I'm so excited to talk about that today.
That's awesome. I just have to ask, when you say you're teaching public school teachers, are you teaching them about how to incorporate the tenets of what we'll be discussing today in the classroom?
It's interesting, right? A lot of my work is preparing New York City public school teachers to teach in the schools that they teach in, which are mainly extrinsic based, right? A lot of my research is intrinsic based. A lot of my actual teaching is very clinical and more extrinsic based, although certainly we talk about the power of intrinsic motivation in education all the time.
Okay, thank you. Let's just get into it. So before I hit record, I was saying that I haven't done an episode on self-determination theory. It's something that when Ned Johnson and Bill Stixrud, who wrote, I talk about this book probably every 5 episodes, The Self-Driven Child, they talk about self-determination theory in there. I kind of know what it is without knowing exactly what it is. And I'm assuming my listeners are somewhere in that range as well. So would you take a few minutes and define what self-determination theory is?
Sure. So self-determination theory is really defining intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is the opposite of extrinsic motivation. And so when we talk about intrinsic motivation, it's doing things for the love of it. It's doing things for the joy of it. It's the internal passion and curiosity we feel about things. I specifically talk about its sub-theory, cognitive evaluation theory, which talks about ways we can facilitate intrinsic motivation, both within ourselves and others. Of course, intrinsic motivation can't be forced. It always has to be facilitated. And cognitive evaluation theory really outlines the environmental tenets that facilitate intrinsic motivation.
So you mentioned cognitive evaluation theory as a sub-theory of this. So can you go into that for us? It's super interesting.
Yeah. So cognitive evaluation theory, again, is just a sub-theory of self-determination theory that really outlines the environmental tenets that facilitate intrinsic motivation in others and within ourselves. And those 3 tenets are a sense of competence, a sense of autonomy, and a sense of relatedness. And the more we have these in our lives, the more intrinsically motivated we feel, the more we could facilitate these in the lives of others, the more intrinsically motivated they feel. And we could dive deep into each one if that's helpful.
I would love that. Yeah. So would we start then with competence? What does that actually look like when we're talking about a student?
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? So it's really, really important that students feel internally a sense of competence. And I always say, like, it's really important they feel a sense of authentic competence, right? That they know their strengths. They know what they're good at. They know what they love and what they're interested in, right? They know they can do things. And when students know that they can do things and optimally challenge themselves, then they end up doing more things, right? So a sense of competence, or you could say confidence, is really, really important. The second tenet is a sense of autonomy, which really lies in freedom and choice. So the more freedom and choice a student has, the better, right? It's really, really important that kids and teens and individuals feel like they have autonomy, feel like they have choices in their lives. And sometimes in school, that looks like a choice text or a choice book or a choice homework assignment. Sometimes out of school, that looks like planning their day or planning their afternoon themselves. I've been putting a lot of research into this concept of autonomy support, right, as parents. Because it's one thing for a kid or a teen to feel like they have choice and freedom. And it's really quite another for the parents or the people around them to provide that student with a sense of autonomy support or support for their choices and their freedoms and their decisions. So that's what a lot of my research has focused on recently. And then the third tenet is the tenet of relatedness, of having one person who believes in you no matter what, right? Students feel related to many people. They might feel related to their teachers or their peers or their families or their parents. It's just really important that a student has one person that really supports them and their autonomy no matter what.
It's so fascinating. There's so many kind of directions we could take this in. And just to pull it back to the audience of this show and the Tilt community are parents of neurodivergent kids, right? And so I think when we're talking about self-determination, especially for kids who, first of all, probably are getting a lot of feedback that's focusing on relative weaknesses or things that they aren't doing right. Maybe we should even just start there, because we do talk a lot here about a strength-based approach to parenting and to teaching. And you work within the special education system as well. So can you talk specifically about how kids with learning disabilities and other kind of neurodevelopmental differences and self-determination, like that Venn diagram of why it can be such a good match for them?
Yeah, we all have strengths and we all have, differences. And none of this is just like, this is for kids with disabilities or this is for kids without, right? All of this is just, we all have strengths. And to give a student, especially a student who has been struggling with knowing their strengths, the opportunity to really, show off their strengths or to really dive deep into their specific interest is a really, really powerful tool. Students should spend most of their day doing what they love and doing what interests them and doing what they really feel strong with. When we talk about a sense of competence and we talk about students with neurodiversity, that sense of competence is so important, because if you know you are strong and you know you have strengths in a particular subject or topic or activity, then it gives you a little bit more leverage to do the hard things, right? So if I know I'm a great artist, but I also know I struggle with reading, hey, I can take on the challenge of reading or decoding because I know I do art well. I'm a great artist. I just struggle in this area, and everyone struggles in some area, right? So I think that competence and that facilitation of competence is so important, especially in kids with neurodiversity who might hear a lot about the things that they need to work on, right? So we need to sort of shift from a feedback perspective to a feed forward perspective, really focusing on their competence and having that competence be a strength that leads them to be able to challenge themselves in other things that they might need assistance with.
Yeah, that's great. So let's take a quick break, and then I want to talk a little bit about why this matters so much. Like, what does the science say about these kids as they grow up, if they've really embraced self-determination? Are you missing someone this holiday season and wish they could be part of your festivities from afar? Skylight Frame is the perfect gift. This touchscreen digital photo frame is a hit with the whole family. You can upload thousands of photos straight from your phone, and they'll appear in seconds. There are a lot of things I love about Skylight Frames, but here are just a few. First, it's really fast and easy to set up. I gave it to my parents last Christmas, and they didn't even need my help to get it going. Sharing photos, also super easy. Just invite friends and family to send photos through the free Skylight app or via email. No accounts, no subscriptions, no hassle. And the best part, you can send photos from anywhere, whether you're across the country or across the world. With a simple tap, your pictures show up instantly on their frame, making it the fastest, easiest way to stay connected. And unlike social media, it's totally private, so you're sharing meaningful moments just with your inner circle. With that said, my mom loves grabbing photos I post online and adding them to their Skylight Frame. Skylight Frames are a fun, low-effort way to keep everyone feeling close without the need for printing or scrolling. And now, as a special limited-time offer for our listeners, get $20 off your purchase of a Skylight Frame when you go to skylightframe.com/tilt. That's skylightframe.com/tilt. Get $20 off your purchase now at skylightframe.com/tilt. One of the most powerful tools we can have in our toolbox is being a calm presence for our kids so we can co-regulate for and with them. But I have learned over and over again that being grounded while navigating hard stuff with our kids can be really challenging. I talk about this a lot on the show and in my community, the importance of tending to our own nervous systems so we can fortify our resources and actually be that calm presence. So I'm really excited to welcome a new sponsor to the show. This is a resource I personally have used for years to help me support my own regulation, the Calm app. Calm is the #1 app for sleep and meditation, giving you the power to calm your mind and change your life. What I love about Calm is how it supports every part of your well-being, from meditations to ease stress, build focus, and create healthy habits, to sleep stories, and my personal favorite at the moment, calming music to help you drift off naturally. It's all there. You'll also find grounding exercises for moments of overwhelm and expert talks on topics like self-esteem and relationships. With Calm, you've got simple, accessible tools to make small, meaningful changes every day. Stress less, sleep more, and live better with Calm. For listeners of our show, Calm is offering an exclusive 40% off a Calm premium subscription at calm.com/tilt. Go to calm.com/tilt for 40% off unlimited access to Calm's entire library. That's calm.com/tilt.
How about some fresh out of the oven gingerbread, bright snowdrop, fresh Iowa pine, and cool peppermint to put you in the holiday cleaning spirit? Made with goodness, not a lot of nonsense. Mrs. Meyer's. See what good can grow. Visit mrsmeyers.com today.
I'm thinking of an interview I did with Jules Edwards and Megan Ashburn, and they wrote a wonderful book called I Will Die on This Hill. And we were talking about this goal of independence, right? That so many of us talk about. We want our kids to be independent. And we discussed actually that's not the goal. We're all dependent on other people. And the goal is a self-determined life. Are we kind of all working towards the same thing here? And I guess as part of that, I'd love to know, what does the science say about self-determination? And what does that look like as an adult, as our kids grow up, if they've been able to learn in this way and highlight this cognitive approach that we just discussed?
So when we talk about self-determination theory, right, and we talk about intrinsic motivation, and when you have students that live a more intrinsically motivated life, their academic outcomes tend to increase, their social outcomes tend to increase, their emotional outcomes tend to increase. You know, I love that you talked about the fact that no one makes decisions in a bubble, right? I do a lot of work on something called supported decision making, which is an alternative to guardianship for students with disabilities. And one of the large projects I've been working on is a decision-making curriculum for those within New York State. And so it's public, it's New York State decision-making curriculum.org. And it's really, a curriculum that focuses on self-determination theory, but also on independent decision-making. We know that students that are more autonomous decision makers, that have great self-advocacy skills, that really live a truly self-determined life, go on to be adults who can make informed, autonomous decisions on their own and have confidence with regards to those decisions because they've always had practice with them. And so, decision making is a muscle. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. And it's just like autonomy support for parents is a muscle, right? The more support you give for your child's autonomous decisions, the better you get at it. And of course, there's always that concept of dignity of risk, right? Where one day your kid will make a bad decision, and haven't we all, right? But by giving, right, like me, I am the queen of poor decisions. But honestly, right, like one day your child's going to make a decision that you don't agree with or that is considered a poor decision. But we all have done that, right? And so providing autonomy support, even for those decisions we don't love, is as important as providing autonomy support for the decisions that we do love as parents. It's less easy.
Gosh, again, I have so many directions I want to take this conversation in because I've got a 20-year-old in university in another country at the moment. And this is a conversation my husband and I have been having constantly because we really are observing from afar, supporting, scaffolding from afar, this autonomous decision-making. And it's kind of like, okay, we just have to see how this plays out. And it's so uncomfortable. You work in the unschooling space too. And my hunch is you encounter a lot of parents who are navigating what does this actually look like to support my child with this autonomous decision making. So can you tell us a little bit about that? Parents who might have resistance to what this actually looks like when we lean into it.
Yeah, I love that. Autonomy support is probably the best way to parent, right? A teen or an adult, right? Because you're looking at a person who's truly independent, right? And that's the whole purpose and the joy of parenting, right? To grow this autonomous human being to make their own decisions. Autonomy support doesn't always mean that you have to agree with the decision your child or teen or young adult has made. It just means that you are there, right? You are there if they fall. You are there if they have made a mistake. You are there to talk things out in a truly non-judgmental way. It just means your presence is there no matter what. And what autonomy support does is it allows individuals to make mistakes. And we all know that we learn by making mistakes, right? We learn how to be. And no one's going to have the truly perfect life, even though that's what we wish for everybody, right? And especially for our children. Mistakes are a part of life. And that's why we give them dignity of risk. We give them autonomy support. We give them the freedom and autonomy to make their own decisions. Hopefully they will be informed decisions. Hopefully they have grown that decision-making muscle so they know the steps to decision-making and how to make great choices and decisions. But when they fall, we are also there to not support the decision per se, but to support the person.
I love that idea too. And I'm thinking about the terms. I think, again, it's Ned and Bill who talk about being a guide for our kids. And Chris Baum, who wrote this book, Finding the Magic in Middle School, talks about being a companion for our kids. And so I really like that. And that is more of, I think, the teen and adolescent that we're talking about. So there are a lot of parents in this community who have kids who have a high drive for autonomy, right? They may have that sub-presentation of autism known as PDA. And so they're embracing this low-demand parenting. So how familiar are you with low-demand parenting? And do you see that as also relating to or working well with autonomy supportive parenting?
Yeah, so I probably use another term. I don't use the term low demand parenting. I will say with regards to this discussion, right? I tell my teachers all this time this, right? Teaching is a one-up, one-down relationship. And facilitation is a more equal relationship. And so when you talk about things like being companions on the journey, facilitating, right? That's what we're talking about when we talk about intrinsic motivation and autonomy support. It's sort of like, you're not one up, one down. You're not the judger, right? Instead, you're working with your child instead of, making rules for your child. And so when you're working with your child, that enables you to be able to facilitate that sense of competence and that sense of autonomy and that sense of relatedness a little bit more in a real way, in a deeper way.
Thank you. So let's take another break, and I want to talk a little bit about intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation, because we all know that there's a lot of behavior charts happening in this parenting space. So we'll be right back.
Blinds.com's Cyber Monday Last Chance is happening now. Don't miss out on up to 45% off site-wide. A Blinds.com design expert can help you make the perfect selection on your schedule. We can handle everything from measure to your whole home installed for one low cost. With over 25 million windows covered, Blinds.com is the #1 online retailer of custom window coverings. Save up to 45% site-wide, plus a free professional measure right now at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
This episode is brought to you by Opill, the first over-the-counter daily birth control pill available in the U.S. Opill is FDA approved, full prescription strength and estrogen-free. Plus, there's no prescription needed. Finally, the days of needing a prescription for birth control are over. Opill is available online and at most major retailers. Take control of your health and reproductive journey with Opill. Birth control in your control. Use code BIRTHCONTROL for 25% off your first month of Opill at Opill.com.
We've discussed intrinsic motivation quite a bit. And I'm just going to always give a shout out to Dan Pink's book, Drive, which I think is such a great book to read about the research he's found about what really motivates humans. And we know that with, again, kids who are maybe in traditional classrooms or settings where the way that they are showing up to those environments can be disruptive, or it might be exhibited in ways that might not work for that environment. There are a lot of behavior plans happening, which all is extrinsic motivation. And so I'm just wondering your thoughts on, is there a time and a place for extrinsic motivation?
Yeah. And just, shout out to Dan Pink, but also shout out to Dichi and Ryan, right? Because what Dan Pink did was he took Dichi and Ryan's research and summarized it in his book. When we talk about intrinsic versus extrinsic, it's not a versus, right? It's really a spectrum. And I always joke that I am the intrinsic motivation researcher who loves stickers and stars, right? And who really thrives on getting an A+, right? And I will never say that extrinsic motivation doesn't work, right? Because I think for some kids, it might work really well. I also tend to veer against giving parents advice on this because, again, every kid is different. Some kids are more extrinsically orientated. They will, really respond to behavior charts and stickers and stars. And some kids are just more intrinsically motivated. And so it's a spectrum. As a parent, you kind of have to find the balance that's right for yourself and your child. And I don't think that intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation can't exist in the same space. I think you can be a parent who facilitates intrinsic motivation, have an intrinsically motivated kid that still enjoys extrinsic motivators, right? Like stickers or stars or grades. I think we get in trouble when there's a dependence on the extrinsic motivators. So when there's the dependence upon the reward, right? It just takes away a little bit of that intrinsic motivation or a lot of bit of that intrinsic motivation. So again, everything in a balance and everything that fits the kid, but you don't want to get dependent on extrinsic motivators.
Yeah. And I thrive on rewards. And my kid who has ADHD and struggles kind of with like staying on task a lot, that's something we've discussed. And what I like about it is now it's like when I have control of the reward and I know that it is something that dopamine hit or whatever, like works for me, but it's still me deciding that I'm going to do this for myself as opposed to somebody else or me doing it for somebody else's approval or whatever. So that's something I really tried to instill in my child is understanding what do you need? What works for you? Are you a reward person or not? Some people are, some people aren't.
Yeah. And I think the more specificity we put to the reward, right? We talk about praise all the time and how good job is great, but it's not informative, right? So positive, specific praise can actually increase levels of competence, right? If it's good job, oh my gosh, I can't believe like that you drew that, or I can't believe that you're playing that piece. That's a different sort of good job than, hey, that sounds great. Like it's just a different sort of praise piece. So thinking about specificity, thinking about how feed forward weaves into all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm thinking about kids who may have these traits, this competency, this autonomy and relatedness. And maybe that is the culture of our family, and they do kind of have that embodied within them. And then they transition maybe to a high school that is really competitive, or they move on to a university that has a whole different culture. I'm just wondering, how do we help kids maintain that sense of deep intrinsic motivation, or what matters to them in those environments?
Yeah, again, I don't think those environments would erase anything, right? I think then the student becomes in competition with themselves. And that's like an interesting concept, right? Like, I want to get the A because I know I can get the A. I'm confident that I can. And so, I want to become more learned in this, or I want to do this. And so, yeah, I don't think the two, again, exist in separate forms. I think a student can come in really intrinsically motivated, and the best students do, right? They come in with a lot of competence, a lot of confidence. They come in with knowing that they can make autonomous decisions, and that makes them a great student. And so, the two can coexist peacefully. Again, there's a little bit of like, how can I be the best person I can be? How can I really utilize the concept of intrinsic motivation, the joy and passion and love I feel about learning, and really take it into this environment, right? Most people in those Ivy League schools, or most people that are CEOs, like really love what they do, right? They spend a ton of time on it because they love what they do. And that all is within that intrinsic motivation realm, although they may get a lot of extrinsic rewards for doing so.
I'm wondering, what about kids who don't have a strong pull towards something? Thinking of the word passion or purpose, and those words are used a lot. And sometimes a kid doesn't have a clear passion. How do you advise parents with kids of really any age to really discover what it is that lights them up? Do you have any ideas for them of how to pay attention or what they should be looking for?
Yeah, I've never met a non-passionate kid, right? Every kid has an interest in something. I think, though, we kind of always, as parents, if they have interest in screens, maybe that's not the interest that we want them to have. Or if they have an interest in a specific thing, maybe that's a non-academic interest they have. And I don't give a lot of parenting advice, but one piece I will give is to really not judge a child's interests, right? I often talk about my own son. We had a year where he was obsessed with bowling, and I was like, oh my gosh, bowling, right? We had a year when he was obsessed with Nintendo, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, right? I'm never going to get through this year. If this is what inspires joy and passion, I don't know if I'm in. And so, right? And really thinking as parents that it's really not about us, right? That joy that a student finds in Nintendo can later lead to a career in coding, and that amazingness that the student finds in bowling or whatever other sport can really lead to some really great opportunities. And so just thinking about that and trying not to judge our child's interests, and instead, right, be on the journey with them. It might not be our interest, and that's okay, right? Our kids are supposed to be independent people. And so, yeah, that's my one piece of parenting advice, right? To really look and see what our kids are inspired by and not judge that, even though it might seem at the time like, oh, maybe that's not the thing I want my kid to love.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. And that's something I also had to learn with my husband, who is a gamer. I had to learn not to judge it. I had to do my own work on that. But I really appreciate that. And just to bring it back to this idea of relatedness, and we've talked about this on the show before. We don't have to love what our kids are doing to show interest in it. When I've spent many an hour many an hour sitting next to my child and saying, oh, like, can I watch you do a playthrough of this game? What are you doing? Why did you build that? Like, teach me how to do this, or teach me how to play this riff on your bass, or whatever it is, even if it's not my thing. But when we're talking about relatedness, that can be, I'm assuming, really anyone who can share that passion with them. Is that right?
Yeah, it's not even the sharing of passion, right? It's just someone who's there no matter what, for the good and for the bad, right? For some kids, it's their peers. For some kids, it's their parent. For some kids, it's a neighbor, right? But really just someone to be there when they fall is really what it is. I love the sharing of passions, and I think it's great. And I think sometimes it's also okay not to try so hard, right? It's okay to really just watch your kid do the things that they love. You don't have to, be super interested in it. You just kind of have to be there sometimes. And so really thinking about that and taking the pressure off us as parents and really finding joy. And I could say this now as the mother of an adult child because I have the hindsight, right? But really finding joy in that every day and really finding joy in just watching and learning from our kids. I think we sometimes forget to step back and really watch our kids and learn from them, not in an active way, but in a really passive way. Like, I'm watching this being grow and how cool.
Yes. Oh, so good. I'm feeling that right now so much. And I'm also going to give a shout out to Leslie Martino, who wrote a book called The Joy of Slow, which we had her on a few months ago, listeners. It was a wonderful conversation, and it really ties in nicely with what we're discussing today. Thank you, first of all, because I've asked you a bunch of questions all over the place. But is there anything regarding self-determination theory that you didn't get to mention that you typically share with people and that you think would be especially relevant for my audience?
I think really dig deep in the theory, right? A lot of us look to the articles we read on the internet and all of the parenting stuff we read just generally. I think that the actual theory, and I say this as an academic, but I also just think it's good to know where things come from, right? Dichi and Ryan are such brilliant psychologists. So really digging deep into that actual theory, I think, is really helpful. Learning about the spectrum of, extrinsic through intrinsic, really digging deep into cognitive evaluation theory and what's so amazing about facilitating that sense of competence and autonomy and relatedness in your kids. Sometimes looking to theory really helps us better understand.
Yeah. And I will just add to just having this conversation just makes me think about the importance of just zooming out always. And that's another thing we talk a lot about on this show is just remembering what we're actually doing here. No matter how old our kids are, they are their own person on their own journey. And our job is to support them in being self-actualized humans who can live a life that they love. And I think this is so perfectly in alignment with that. And I love this idea of like going back to the theory because it is so grounded in science. It's like a nice anchor foundation for doing this work as parents. So that's great. Is there any place that you would like listeners to go? I know you've written some books. Like, how would you like listeners who want to explore your work more deeply? Where would you like them to go?
Yeah, I have a website. It's ginarileyphd.com. If they're interested in homeschooling starter guide is available everywhere. I've done some real strong academic research on unschooling. So if that's an interest, you can find my research on ResearchGate, as well as my book, Unschooling, Exploring Learning Beyond the Classroom. I'm on social media. So yeah, come find me. Let's have a conversation. And I always enjoy email. So any questions listeners have, feel free to email. I'm so excited. And I thank you so much for having me. It's been such a great conversation.
Oh gosh, thank you. Thank you so much for everything you shared, for the work that you do. Listeners, I will have links to all of the places to connect with Gina, including her books, because they're a great resource. And I know many of you guys are unschooling. And actually, I'll just say I learned about Dr. Riley through Blake Bowles, who we've had on the show a couple times about unschooling. So much overlap in our spaces. So thank you so much for today. And yeah, I'd love to stay in touch.
Thanks so much. Have the best day.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. To learn more about today's guest and the resources we talked about, check out the extensive show notes page on Tilt Parenting. There you'll find key takeaways, links to all the resources mentioned, and even a full transcript of our conversation. Just go to tiltparenting.com/podcast and select this episode. If you're looking for personal support from me and connection with the phenomenal community of parents raising neurodivergent kids, join us in the recently rebooted Differently Wired Club. The new Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Go to tiltparenting.com/club to learn more. The Tilt Parenting podcast is hosted by me, Debbie Reber, author of Differently Wired and the founder of Tilt Parenting, and was edited by Andrea Curtis Amasquita. To support this show, please join my Patreon campaign where you can set up a small monthly contribution. Just go to patreon.com/tiltparenting to learn more. If you want to follow Tilt on social media, you can find us at @tiltparenting on Instagram and Facebook. And lastly, please take a minute to leave a 5-star rating or review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. That helps this show stay visible so others can find it more easily. And that's all for this week. Stay safe, stay well, and take good care. And for more information about any of the parenting resources Tilt offers, visit tiltparenting.com.